Welcome back, everyone. This drawing is going to be a still life scene. It is for my session 17 and 18 Art 101 course. And what I've done is I've altered the textbook's assignment. That one is calling for a tonal paper collage. And I felt that that particular assignment is more geared to a design course like Art 107 at our CSN college. So instead of doing that, we're going to do a linear value tonal drawing in ink. So I will be showing you my still life, the preparation to do the drawing, and then also the tonal chart that accompanies this as you make it. So heads up, just do not buy the paper collage supplies for this assignment. Please just use your Signo 207 Uniball ink pen, black please. Alright, so let me show you everything here. So what I have is my still life, and let me turn my light on. So you're going to want a still life scene that's thematic, and by having it thematic it makes a little bit more sense in terms of the objects that you choose and how then you would arrange them. So here I have wine bottle, glass of wine, cork opener, the cork, as well as a book and some glasses. And then from there you can kind of, I don't know, draw some parallels as to what kind of an evening that may include or entail. Alright, and then the scene is lit with a strong lamp here, so you see it right there. And then the lamp causes the shadows as well as gives you more contrast, and then you also can see like the elements of highlights. So here it gives you, for the most part, a pretty nice range of values for the drawing. Alright, so that's the still life setup. Here I have the sketch as well as our tonal chart. So the tonal chart is done in ink with that Signo 207 gel pen, and you are going to make 4 scales with 5 squares, number 5 being the white of the paper, and then descending in order going darker all the way down to 1. Your linear value techniques include hatching, cross-hatching, scumbling, and stippling. And then after you make your chart in that light to dark with these kinds of marks, you'll then do your sketch. So here I've done my sketch. Can't turn the camera that way. And what I've done here is, when I made this, I basically took my viewfinder to find the composition that I wanted. So I toyed around with orientations, and then I came up with something like that, and then I sketched it. So for the sake of the length of the video, I'm going on the assumption or making the judgment call here that we're all quite versed now with how to sketch using the sketch line technique. Light smoky lines that are easily erased in case you make ill shapes. And then once you have the sketch laid in this, I also wanted to mention that this is the 9x12 paper, and some of you have the 11x14. Regardless of whatever size sketch pad paper you have, you'll be laying in an 8x10 picture plane. So you can see that is diagnosed with the border. So after your sketch is finished, then you're going to use your scale, and you see how each one is numbered. And you're basically going to assign a number to each one of the shapes, whether it's a negative space shape, a positive shape, a shadow, a highlight, whatever. So as you're looking at your still life, and then you compare contrast to your tonal chart, you're going to make an artistic choice here of what number should go where in your sketch. And essentially you're kind of creating a paint by numbers scenario, but instead we'll be doing it with ink, and then you will choose then one of these particular linear value techniques to then finish off the drawing in ink. Okay, so that's where this video comes into play, how to apply one of those techniques to your drawing. So the question will come up, can I, after I make the sketch, can I actually lay in all my technique lines or marks into my sketch and then go over it with pen? You could do that. And the reason for students to do it especially is the concern is that ink is very hard, if pretty much impossible, to erase, especially this particular kind of ink pen. And so the concern is that if I totally, mess this up and I can't erase it, can I actually do everything in graphite first and then trace over it? So yes, you can do that. It's just essentially you're doing the drawing twice. So if you like that extended time that you're putting into this drawing, go for it. So I'm going to negate that step and just go ahead and start putting in my information. So because of my setup here, my still life's here and my drawing's here, and then my tripod holder for my camera's there. I'll have to saddle up my camera in there, and then so you guys won't be able to see the still life while I'm actually making the drawing. So for what it's worth, so that's what we're drawing, but for the most part you've seen this and the sketch, so I'm hoping that now the choice of not seeing both is not an issue. Alright, so I'm going to put the camera here, lock it into place. Go. And then my hope is that after you kind of see what I do, that it will make sense when you tackle this assignment yourself. Okay, so we just kind of zoomed in. So again, the sketch was done with a HB pencil, holding the pencil like this to sketch everything loosely in. If anything looks ill, you just take your eraser, erase it out, and then redo whatever sort of line work to adjust it. And then I came in and used the numbering and then assigned a number for every single shape in this sketch, so that every single shape is assigned a number that corresponds to this chart right here. Alright, so I think for my drawing I'm going to do, let's see, what should we do? I'm going to do the cross hatching. Okay? So depending on how pragmatic you want to do this, you can work light to dark or dark to light. It really doesn't matter, but I think probably the best thing to do is just work each number at a time in your drawing. So let's say if we want to start with number 1, we hit all the number 1s until they're all finished and filled in, and then move on to number 2, and that's just rinse and repeat. So we're going to do that. So you will have to have your still life in front of you, so that as you're making decisions about the kind of marks based on the technique that you choose, some things that need to come into play. So for instance, this bottle is a round object. It's a cylinder. So when you make your cross, say you want to do the cross hatching or the hatching marks, you want those lines to go with the rounding of the object. If you just do them straight up and down and left and right, you'll inadvertently flatten that object. And you want this to have some 3 dimension to it. So if you can remember far back to cross contour lines, you then want your hatching or cross hatching lines to mimic or obey the surface of these objects as you're inputting them in. So that's a really crucial thing to keep into mind as you're observing your still life and then applying your marks. Alright, so I'm going to start with number 1 and doing the cross hatching. So I'm going to start down here in the bottom of the bottle. Probably when I swept through the scene, you probably didn't notice it, but those of you who do drink wine, you know at the bottom of the bottle there's usually sort of this rounded sort of dome, and that's for the sediment. So I'm going to deal with that first. I'm going to go in a rounding cross contour like manner with my first set of lines in the cross hatching, and I'm just filling the shapes that have the number 1 in it. So working kind of slowly. Then I want to look up, and then I notice that there's kind of a highlight through here, so I'm not going to, when I cross this, I'm going to kind of avoid this strip right here. So when I do the crossing line, I'm going to go down with the direction of that dome feature inside the bottle. I'm going to avoid that area. And then I just come back and then I tighten up the areas with more crossing lines to give the illusion that this area is really dark. So don't be afraid to go back into this, and maybe in the separations of these lines you can add some more darkening it. Okay. Now you've noticed I haven't outlined anything. That's another thing that I don't want to do. And think of, we know what happens when we heavily outline everything. It has a tendency to flatten that object. So at the end of the drawing, when you want to do more of the hardcore details, that's where you want to deal with the edges of your objects using a varied line. All right? So again, don't fall into the pitfall of heavily outlining all your objects. Okay, so here I have a strip of black, and then I hit the label. I want to avoid the label because the label is a pretty light object, and I actually forgot to label it. But I'm following this shape up, and then it peters out there, and now I'm going to cross it. So filling in, again, I'm filling in all the number 1s. Here I have another number 1, and so this area right here is actually the label on the backside of the bottle, and I'm looking at how that label rounds to the back. So it rounds like this. So I want my cross contour lines to obey that rounding feature. And what it will do for my viewer is it gives them some information that this value is seen through the bottle to the back side, and so it also gives the viewer some information that this bottle has an element of transparency. You can see through it. Now, even though it's a dark green bottle, that's typical of most wine bottles. You notice that I'm just drawing right through my numbers. Since my numbers are in graphite, at the end of the drawing when my ink is dry, I can just erase them. And you know that the eraser won't affect the ink at all. But make sure that your ink is dry when you do it, otherwise you will smudge your ink. Alright, as it comes down in here, this is a 1 up here, and then the 1 fades into a 2. So I'll show you how I'm going to deal with that. So in the 2, I have done one set of lines, but as the lines for the 1 come down, I'm going to fall short of the 2 area. And then I'm going to take every other line to do the number 2, so that it appears slightly wider and not as dark. And then I'll come in purposely into the 1 and tighten up the spaces with additional crossing lines to get it to appear darker. And what you can do, what's great about these kinds of drawings, is that once you get away from this, you take a step away to assess it, and then you kind of compare contrast your values that you're seeing here versus here. And if it looks like it's still too light, you can actually come back in and do additional lines in between the gaps to tighten up the pattern, and then visually it will look darker. But obviously we can't go lighter in these particular drawings because you can't erase the ink. So that's just a quality that you're just going to have to remember. Alright, moving up into the neck of the bottle. I'm just kind of doing where the lines would be. And what I'm doing is, by rounding these, as I work up, I want to try and keep the same direction with these lines. The other thing I want to do is make sure that I make the highlight shapes more visible before I lay in my value. Otherwise, I can easily go over my highlight and lose it. Okay, so kind of prep the area, and then I start putting in my first set of cross hatching marks in one direction. It's rounding with the neck of the bottle. Again, this is all the number ones, so the darkest value. And then I cross it. Again, don't fall prey to wanting to use tools. You want to freehand all this information. Otherwise, it starts to look really sterile. It loses its sort of fine art look. And again, this class is a Art 101 course. It is not architecture or engineering or drafting. So we won't be using those tools. Alright, so things are coming along rather steadily. And then I'm just kind of taking a step back. I know you can't see that in the camera, but I'm just looking to see what's what. And so as this label goes to the back side right here, it's a 1. It's very dark. So put that in. Kind of round with that shape. And then looking up in here, just the inside of the bottle, I can see just a little bit of the inside of the ellipse. So just put in some quick cross hatching marks in there. Kind of tune up the dome on the bottom of the bottle inside. Okay, so let's move on to some other ones. So in the corkscrew, I have the rubber handles. Now I'm going down on the side of this. Hold on, let me see if you guys can actually see this. Yeah. Okay. So I'm doing now the side, and then I want to go over the top, so I change the direction of my lines, and that will help allude to the 3 dimensions. So let me bring the camera down so you can see that. That's a pretty important feature to show. Sorry about my camera movement. Alright, let's let it focus. So right here you can see that the different directions, there we go, now it's focusing, that the lines take. So on this side they go up and they go back, and then on the top they go this way and then that way. So it's real important that as you're filling in your linear tonal marks that they go in the direction of the surface of that particular part of the object. Otherwise, you'll lose the three-dimensional illusion that you're attempting to create, not only with these marks, but the tones as well. Okay? So just something to consider as you're doing this. Let me get the camera settled again. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to go over to the other side of the rubber handle and going on the inside of it, and then I'm going to cross them. Again, this is all the number ones. And then you can go over the top. And then cross those. And then visually, my viewer will get that it does that. Alright, I kind of have the same quality back here on the handle. That's actually the part to pop a bottle cap. Again, changing the directions. There we go. And looking to see where all the other number ones are. So that means shadows, anything that's really dark or black. So the actual corkscrew is like a number one. So making the lines in one direction. And then just crossing them. I'm almost just kind of pecking to make my marks. So there's the corkscrew. Then there's the shadow that's inside here. There's that. Alright, so there's all the number ones for the corkscrew opener. Get those real quick right there. Okay, now let's move on to the wine glass. So I have a couple of shapes. So I'm looking at the liquid part right here. And notice on the side, it's darker than what you can see on the flat surface inside. So I'm going to first kind of break up these shapes. I want to go in a rounding, kind of like bowl-like direction. Again, try to keep your lines within the confines of your sketch, and that will help keep it look more streamlined and clean. If your lines go out in different directions, it sort of muddies it up. So I'm doing the really dark shapes first, even though they're ones, but there's kind of like gaps in between them that I'm now going to show. Okay, as I come to the center, I start going straight up and down, and then as I move to the right, I then go in the other rounding direction. And that will help give dimension to that part of the glass. This is one set of cross-hatching marks, and now that I want to cross them, just like that. Again, you can come in later when you do your details to clean up edges, because we're going to do the edge treatment later with the line variation. Alright, so now I'm going to do the inside of the glass and kind of the ellipse. And because the glass, since we're looking through glass, it kind of distorts the shapes. So I'm just going to quickly outline the distorted shapes that I'm seeing. So it distorts the tones. And then I'm going to kind of make dots around the highlights that I'm seeing in the glass. I don't want to physically completely outline them because it will really flatten them. So by kind of making dots in a stippling-like manner around them, I can keep them look a little bit more low-key, so that when I do the tonal value or linear values around them, they're not so flat-looking. Alright, so now dealing with the liquid inside, so using kind of a rounding directional first set of crosshatch lines, avoiding my highlight shapes, just like that, and then I want to cross them. So the question is, which way should I cross them? And because it's down like this and it's going away from me, I'm going to make it kind of a diagonal direction going away from me. So think of it like foreshortened lines diagonally going away. Okay, so just like that, and then it makes it look like it's going like this. Then I'm going to do these shapes aren't as dark, so just kind of lightly, with a little bit more spacing, to create that difference. Alright, so that takes care of these one areas. So I'm going to go over here to the book, and I'm going to deal with each shape. So this is the spine of the book, and then this side or face of the book is pretty straight up and down, so I want my cross contour lines to resemble that direction, straight up and down. And then the same thing along this edge. So I kind of have this gold leaf pattern around there, so I'm just going to kind of make an undulating outline of the basic shapes within that. I really don't have any interest in getting into the hardcore details of this for this particular drawing. And then I'm going to take care of that. So the book is that dark green, and then I want to cross it. So slowly cross-hatching the spine of the book. So just small sets of cross-hatching lines. And then kind of fill the gaps, just kind of looking at the gaps in between the gilding, just to kind of give the impression that there is some sort of a pattern. And I know that at this point I may have starting to lose your ability to follow this. Might be just almost on the verge of watching golf or paint drying. So let me just do a little bit more. Well, let's do this, because I think you're basically getting the point of how this works. So let me finish the wine glass with the other tones. And then you can see how I deal with the line variation on the object. So, because I really want to push that idea that you really want to avoid heavily outlining everything. Alright, so in the cast shadow from the bottle actually is up on the backdrop, and that shadow is behind the wine glass. So there's a value that goes through the glass here, and I've assigned that as a number 3. So looking at my number 3, which is right here, and you notice that this is the direction of the cast shadow, so it's at this diagonal. So to convey that that's a cast shadow, I want to make it flat. So by doing that, I don't want to round it like I've done here on the object. So I hope that that makes sense. So when I start doing the value in the glass, because the glass is round, I want to slightly, but almost just kind of point at it being slightly rounded, because the glass will actually create the sense of a distortion, a visual distortion. And another way you can show it or convey it is by using this sort of line variation, as you can see that I'm doing, that's not a full stroke like here. And what that does is, by showing that difference through the glass, your viewer will get a better idea that you're trying to convey information through the transparency. That's just one thing that you can kind of pick. Now so I've kind of gone this way, this diagonal. Now I want to go straight across it in this direction. Again, because I don't want that value to take on a 3-dimension. I want it to stay flat, knowing that it's kind of projected or cast across the backdrop. So I'm kind of using this varied line in my cross-hatching line work on this shadow to convey that the shadow looks slightly different through this glass. And this just seems like this would work to convey that. It's almost like, for some of you it may look kind of like burlap. Maybe that's a good descriptive word. Again, trying to avoid your highlight shapes. Alright, so I have that in. So now with the wine glass, I'm looking at my wine glass and I want to see where the line variation would be. So remember, in line variation, and then with this being a pin, you're kind of limited, but you can use broken lines, implied lines, as well as really thick, heavy lines. So I'm going to look for all the dark areas and then just kind of hit those areas. So looking at where the shadows are and then slowly describing where they would be. Down here I can see the edge, so I want to show the thickness of the foot of the glass. I have these highlights in here, kind of over these rounding marks. So this would be kind of like line variation and details. So lines that invite a heaviness. So it's pretty dark on this side of the glass. As it comes up and it's in light again, I'm just going to kind of break up that line, and then it rounds towards the back. So this is the ellipse. other side. Okay, now I'm going to put in, so on the surface of the glass are these other sort of shadow reflections. I'm going to put those in and then slightly cross it. And what this will do is it will make this side of the glass more apparent. So really looking at, use your observation skills where those are occurring. See how it's slightly curving to go with the curve of the glass. Okay. And then there's one more right here. And this gives more dimension to the glass. Okay? So I hope that makes sense visually. And as I take a step back, really looking at where these darker values are occurring, and then just going in and making those shapes more so with another set of crosshatch. And there might be some areas that you created like a gap. You can go in and kind of fill in those gaps just to kind of promote more of a darker, visually looking value in that. I'm going to do the same thing in the bottle. Come back and fill in these gaps, avoiding my highlights. Okay, so I think you guys are starting to get the point that you basically just, wherever you have your number, you would use basically whatever technique you choose. Not only choose one technique and then use that technique through the entire drawing. Don't combine techniques, okay? It'll look silly. Other things to consider, don't heavily outline things. And you can see like the wine glass is not heavily outlined. Some areas it's broken, it's light. So there's also areas, because it's broken, it's implied. Other areas it's really dark. So that just, it's, you know, some areas invite it, some areas don't. Changing the quality of the line, how the lines also goes with the rounding of the object to help allude to that this object is in 3D, and I want to retain that 3D illusion on this flat surfaced paper. Okay, so to finish this drawing, I would essentially just keep continuing to work each numbered area, laying in that specific spacing of cross hatched lines, and then puzzle it together. And that's how it would finish off. And then at the end I would do my line variation and any hardcore details, and then kind of adjust any tones. Alright guys, so I hope that this process makes more sense. You're now having a better idea of how to start this and how to take it in the direction with your particular still life and get a successful drawing. So I'm going to pan out so you can see both the chart as well as the drawing, and then there's my Signo 207 pin. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Good luck to you.